This is Life Lessons Lounge, and I'm Igina Gerazi. Here, we explore diverse life stories and the wisdom they hold. Let's delve into the stories that shape us, teach us, and connect us all. I'm very grateful you're here, and I will do a short introduction of you because you have such an impressive career. And so Rocio Martínez Núñez, I hope I've pronounced it right, is an acclaimed molecular biologist with a global academic and research footprint. Her academic journey began at Universidad, Complutense, Madrid, and led her to groundbreaking work on microRNAs during her PhD in Southampton. Her postdoctoral tenure at the University of California, Santa Cruz, saw the development of novel gene expression analysis methods. She has since utilized her RNA expertise to address asthma and respiratory diseases, and currently leading a pioneering research group at King's College London, focused on RNA regulation in disease contexts. And Rocio has also made significant contributions to COVID-19's response efforts, including leading King's College London's testing program and enhancing PCR's testing capabilities in Spain. Her dedication extends to the intersection of data science and biology, teaching bioinformatics and advocating for scientific innovation and learning. Well, thank you for being here, Rocio, and welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. Thanks for having me.
And as I said, what an impactful and multifaceted career you have.
Thanks. Well, that's the aspiration when you become a scientist. You know what you do matters. First you think, oh, it has to matter to you when you're doing it. But to me, the dream is making a contribution that changes things for the better, hopefully.
Oh, that's beautiful. And what initially sparked your interest in biology? I'm very curious.
That's a very good question. I think I like understanding how things work. And I found biology fascinating because it's like everything moves all the time. And I thought that was really cool. And everything happens in a very small scale. I'm also quite small myself. So I thought, that's why I like molecular biology.
All but with big curls.
Yes.
Love it. It's curl power.
Girl power. So yeah, I just found it fascinating how much we can explain using chemistry and physics and maths. Not so much. I think that needs to be how life happens, and I found that fascinating. So that's how I ended up studying biology.
That's really amazing. And well, in your journey from starting the microRNAs to developing new methods for gene expression analysis, hope I said it right. So what has been the most surprising or counterintuitive finding that you've encountered that in a way has also shaped your approach to research?
Well, actually, the times I've learned the most was when I found something that I was not looking for, fun enough. So it's something that jumps at you when you are, when you are testing something and you think, oh, this little molecule does this thing. And so if we work with a lot of perturbations in molecular biology, so if you think of it as this controls this, then you think, okay, I can perturb this and I can see an effect here. And suddenly you're like, no, you are seeing something here. And that has happened a few times, and it's really amazing. The first time it happens, you think, done something wrong, let's repeat the experiment. And then when you confirm it, that's really, really cool. So an example very recently was we are investigating a factor inside cells, one of the molecules that all our cells have, and how the common cold virus, how it's using it for its own advantage. So there is always a real fight when there is a viral infection, because viruses are always, they have to be parasites. They cannot survive on their own, which is something also I find fascinating. And once they infect cells, once they get in the cell, they have to kind of kidnap everything for them. So they're very greedy. And cells have evolved mechanisms to fight against that. So we were testing the role of one of these molecules, and what we saw in two different analyses were opposite data, literally. And bless my group, I asked them to repeat the stuff so many times, because it's like, this goes the other way around. It can be, but it is. So we are investigating that further, and essentially that's leading us to think different of our experiments as well, and how we interpret the data, and how we you need to be always guided by what you see and what you can, what you measure several times, and then acknowledge that, no, actually you were wrong, and this happens this way. And that's very cool as well, because you end up thinking about stuff completely different and opening potentially a new door into many other things.
An assumption that I hold, especially for scientists, is that they're very peculiar about measurements, and also kind of perfectionist in what they do. I have some scientist friends, and even it kind of permeates in other areas of life, right? Like things need to be in a certain way, and the measurements very exact. So how are you with that?
I think for that, I'm probably the chaotic one.
Is there a chaotic scientist?
Definitely.
Okay.
Things make sense in your head, and then then it's always like everything is a little bit buzzing, but for me in a good way. But for example, I love cooking, and I love cooking things that have lots of ingredients and spices, because for me it's like an experiment in the lab. But I don't follow a recipe, rarely, and therefore I just open the cupboard and I'm like, oh, this one is nice. So I end up mixing a lot of stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But I also learn from pattern recognition, which we do a lot in science as well. So in a way, that's what I mean with chaos. I think it may seem chaos, but for me, it's like very organized in a way. Of course, absolutely. You have certain things that more in the lab, I would think. Now, probably my family and my partner would go like, no, that's also in real life. More, I think it's more in the lab that it's like, no, I know this works this way. Stop the innovation and let's just do it this way because we need this data, or there is no point in trying this because I know it doesn't work. And we are not very good in science at publishing negative data, for example. Means that a lot of people around the planet are repeating exactly the same experiment that you've done to get no data.
That's so interesting, because if you had shared, then it would save everybody some time and some efforts.
And a ton of money, because we of course, funding comes in different ways, but in many occasions it's publicly funded. And you wonder, I know the 20 different ways of how not to do an experiment, but I can only communicate that to my group or my collaborators, but I cannot put that on a publication. And there is this kind of a big topic in science that we should have like a journal of negative data, because then you actually tell people, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. It doesn't work.
Or do you know there are some events that are called fuck up nights. And maybe it would be fuck up science experiments.
No.
Sorry for the language.
Oh, please. I'm Spanish. We use colorful language usually. So yeah, no, I've seen Wall of Shame in as a joke, where you put the worst experiment you've done that looks terrible, and it's a way of kind of making light of it, because you put an enormous amount of hours for then something that doesn't work at all. or the data looks rubbish, forget about the hypothesis not being wrong, just things that technically fail. It's the same as if you burn something when you are cooking and you're like, because you were watching TV or something. So nothing particularly deep, or, sometimes it's a silly reason. And I think it's a good way of sharing that we all fail. And that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where innovation happens as well.
Oh, totally. I mean, you have many examples where, I don't know, I forgot to put something and, oh, wow.
Something else happens.
Yeah, that people have discovered enzymes and things like that just because they left the reaction or they forgot something. And I've learned about how to do certain things just because I was doing multiple things at the same time. And one of those kind of got at the back of my mind, and then I realized like hours or days later. And then I went back. Yeah, it was one of those oops, and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So
Right.
yeah, you learn from those things as well.
And I have an assumption that there is more urgency in science than other areas in terms of, like, take COVID-19, for example, right? Like, there was the urgency of time that you needed to come up with something urgent.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that urgency?
I think it's hyper focus, I would say,
Mm.
probably. That's the bit of being a scientist that, you know, has its good and bad, I guess, when you are in that zone and someone sometimes needs to pull you out of it, like, it's okay. Enough. To me, COVID-19 was a very good example, or probably the example that we've lived, in which you see that if the whole world is doing research on something, things change rapidly. And that has not been the case for many diseases. And actually, for example, diagnostics and screening of many other things just suffered because everyone shifted the focus towards that, because it was, it was not perceived, it was an emergency, right? And no one really knew what was coming around the corner, or if, even if the vaccines were being developed, how long do they last once you get vaccinated, all that stuff. So there was something urgent to do every single day. And that was sustained for a very long time.
Were there sharing of information?
Totally.
Okay,
A lot. I also know that some people didn't want to share. I have to say, everyone that I've encountered or interacted with, everyone had kind of that common interest of, let's share what we are learning and then we kind of do it better, or we do it faster, or if this hasn't worked for you, why not? And, get this, that, or the other. I do know of researchers that, maybe they didn't want to share stuff because then they wouldn't be the first ones, that kind of stuff. That happens still.
There's that ego a little bit.
Completely. 100%. I don't know them personally. I have to say that I've heard the stories. We all know that happens. I have to say, everyone actually did a lot of stuff in COVID, and the reason why we did was because there was an enormous amount of people involved.
And you discovered the PCR testing, or made it, what is the right term? So made it accessible, or made it very rapid, right?
Yes. Well, me and many other people. I'm here as representative, if you may.
Of course.
I was leading the development of new protocols, and it was actually really, really remarkable that we did that based on people volunteering their time, because those people would have been at home otherwise. They could have stayed at home. They didn't have to come to work. And we, just in our school, we had a list of over 100 people volunteering their time and expertise just to do whatever. And people that couldn't come, I remember people that were emailing just to say, I cannot leave the house for personal reasons, but if you have data analysis, send it to me, I can do this. And there was no day night, it didn't matter.
And these were normal people, not scientists, or who were
This was
they?
all scientists. This was all from within my institution. When some of the work, when the work that we did in Spain got in the press, then people that are not scientists also got in touch because they wanted to help or promote, whatever we were doing in their places of residence, and that was also remarkable. That there was that will from many people to actually help or push towards bringing in new testing, whatever they could do, and that was a really good thing to see, and something that I think is been a bit forgotten because we tend to remember. I don't totally understand it because we tend to remember to dwell on the bad stuff that happened, but then we tend to forget a lot of bad stuff as well because we are humans, and otherwise you are always in this circle of misery, and we don't do that. But we forget quite quickly the good stuff that happens or the stuff that makes us learn in a, particularly if it's a difficult situation. And I think a little bit of that has happened with COVID,
Yeah.
where people don't talk about, there was a lot of goodwill and a lot of good movement from a lot of people. First and foremost, everyone that was taking care of patients wearing a beanbag as protection.
Yeah.
But there were lots of people doing tons of stuff, volunteering for many things, related or unrelated to healthcare, but to well-being.
Mm.
We don't. I don't hear anything about that. We don't talk about that.
No, and also because it's not everybody's world in a way. Like the background work that is done, it's not noticed, right? If things work, sometimes people don't notice who does. Only when they don't work, they find the people to blame, right?
Yeah.
So that's typical. But I'm very grateful for all the work you and all your team have been doing because I think it has really made some changes.
It was a privilege, I have to say, to be able to contribute and to work with so many remarkable and really wonderful people and generous people.
So it started at the King's College in London,
Mm-hmm.
right, with the team there. And then you applied it to hospitals in Spain, right?
Yeah, so I was doing both things kind of in parallel because they were two separate. Well, they are two separate worlds, right? And while we were trying to bring uh, certain robots, which essentially is like an automated a machine that makes a lot of automation possible, which means a person doesn't have to be doing that work. That tends to be very repetitive. And while that had to be sorted out, so there were people in. So we were mostly 5 people driving that work in Spain, which we did solely over WhatsApp.
Are you serious?
Yeah, really.
Amazing.
WhatsApp and some Zoom calls and stuff, but mostly it was like, what do you need? I need this. Okay, I'm on it. So we had people that were fantastic at getting as philanthropists because they were getting philanthropy. It was all funded by donations.
Mm.
And I don't know people that donate that kind of money, but they did. And or they needed to contact someone to ensure that the actual equipment would be loaded on the planes, and that was in China. So they were like, oh, I know so and so in Inditex, and they fleeted the plane to bring the stuff to Spain because there was someone there making sure that that would take off and land in Spain, not somewhere else, which was happening at the time. Actually, people would bid for equipment at the really onset of the pandemic. People would bid there and there to take it somewhere else.
Wow. See, I don't know these stories. Amazing. Very grateful.
So again, for that, it was a collision of us meeting through a network, and then it kind of happened. And then, so I was, again, very lucky to work with then many people in different hospitals, some of whom I still have connections with, and I've learned a lot from them as well. So, it goes totally both ways. So yeah, it was a busy time, but
I remember at that time where the PCR came out, like how quickly and how fast and what it did, like the impact that it had on everything, when it came to COVID.
it did. The thing is, the pandemic put the word PCR in everyone's mouth, which was, quite remarkable, because, we've been doing, so PCR was, as technique, was invented in 1983.
Okay, cool.
So there is like a urban legend about it.
I don't know that.
So it's been with us for a very long time. And it was the first method that I learned in a lab, essentially. And that's how I ended up doing PCRs, because I saw, oh, this is diagnosed by PCR. I know how to do PCRs. I can do PCRs. So
That's amazing.
me, like many other scientists, is such a basic technique that we all use in the lab for many, many purposes. And therefore it's got many applications. And once you know, the trick with that is knowing what you're looking for. But once we knew, because they knew what the virus looked like genetic wise, then designing a good PCR, it takes no time really, if you know how to do it. But again, that was a question of, there was a lot of sharing of, use this specifically with this concentration and this thing. There was no let everyone do whatever. So there were certain institutions that they were setting that as kind of a global standard almost, which again is, for some things, is unheard of. And definitely in diagnostics, when there's such a big market that generates a lot of revenue, people don't share those things that easily. So in this case, it was shared from the beginning, because it was like, we all need to be doing this. And here's how you do it. So, people were giving their cooking recipes for free.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So, what did you learn from all that experience, especially during COVID-19?
I think I've learned a bit about human nature,
How's that?
good and bad.
Tell me about it.
Good and bad. So I think, you saw the both ends in a way. I think it's like any challenging situation. People tend to react in extreme ways. And that is happening all around the globe with many things, without definitely not wanting to go into politics. But things are getting quite extreme in a way. And you saw that in COVID. There were people that were completely doing everything for free, volunteering,
Bit hard.
working for 7. There was no time, no whatever, whatever you could do, it just was like, consider it done. And then there was the other side, that it was people ripping off the system, and that still angers me. I Because it's not fair. and 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 sometimes, it's not about the big scandals or whatever. Sometimes it's about small things, and you think, but it's not important. You are, the situation in which we are in calls for doing the right thing. If there is a time to do what we should do, is now.
Mm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It definitely makes sense. Yeah, and you are so pure and so dedicated. I can see that, and of course the fairness is important to you. So
Well, I try to be fair. I probably don't always get it right, because you always have your bias, same as with our experiments, that you think this has to go this way and it doesn't. And so, by all means, I don't think I am, I know I can be better and do a lot of better things, but I always think, "Ah, at least I try." And yeah, unfair things really get me.
I can see that.
And for it, and the PCR was one of the best examples. We've published those protocols, so it's nothing that I'm disclosing here that is like IP protected or whatever. But we made a protocol with another investigator, also a woman, Hannah Misho, and we did a protocol to, when you analyze a sample with a virus for COVID, usually there is one first step to get the genetic material from the virus, because it's all mixed up with whatever sample it is, either from the nose or from saliva, which is what we did. And people, you could buy this, that, on the other. And then we went like, okay, no, we are going to make our own thing. And we essentially made it with soap, water, and alcohol.
That's simple.
So, a bit, super simple. And this is like biochemistry from the 80s, really. But it's a bit like open the cupboard and see what's there and go like, this one, this one, this one. Some chemistry behind, of course. But it worked beautifully. And it was 10 times cheaper or 20 times cheaper. It was, a lot cheaper. And that was one of the principles, that you need to cater in a health emergency for people that can do the super wonderful stuff, the super expensive stuff, and they have to do that. But also there is a massive proportion of the planet that cannot do that. And actually it's the vast majority of the planet. And I think our tasks as scientists is also shouldering in and saying, yeah, I'm here to help. I find that that's what we should be doing. I don't think that makes me a saint. It's just, that's how it should be.
Yes, and what I'm noticing, it's lovely, the ability to be that creative and innovative with being simple as well, right? Exactly as you said, like opening the cupboard, see what you have, and then what can we do about it, which is amazing. And you mentioned your colleague, who's a woman as well, and that's also a little bit of a different topic, but we'll come back to COVID. So how is it to be a woman or women in science and in academia?
I think it's a lot easier and better now, I have to say, for sure. I feel I'm in a place where that doesn't really matter. And I can totally see that, particularly in the new generations, they are gender and colorblind, which is great.
That's amazing. Yeah,
it is. So, of course, I've seen. Saying otherwise would be lying. Of course, I've seen sexism and all of that. Yeah, totally. I mean, saying no, it doesn't exist would be lying. But I think is definitely a lot less. And I hear stories from, different generations, and I don't see those things. Thank God for that. And that's been super clear through history, even for the discovery of DNA, where we still call it Watson and Crick, which are two men. They actually stole the X-ray that was required to demonstrate that DNA is a double helix from a woman, who they belittled and called nicknames. And actually, she was in King's College London, so we have the Rosalind Franklin, we have buildings, and and those things, I would like to think that I have not seen that, you know what I mean? But of course I've witnessed, comments and things that you think, oh God, you wouldn't say that to a guy. But I think it's now, one is called for, like that is super, it's really easy to highlight that. There is also an awareness that was not there before. So if you think something is kind of you can go and you can, of course you can go all shebang and whatever, but you can go and have a word with like, I think this, and people are usually mortified.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's completely different. And I have all the admiration for the older generations that have done any role and job where they had to take on a bit more leadership role, because I'm sure that was really difficult.
Yeah. But thank you for paving the way as well.
Thank you. Well, you change it from the inside. Sorry, that's why I always tell to my students.
What did you say again? You changed different
On the inside. You cannot leave things to change on their own. If you want something changed, stay and contribute to change.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
So you do teach as well?
Yes.
So you teach in King's College London?
So I teach different things. I teach molecular biology to what we call undergrads. That's when you join university, and that's what what you study. And also I teach students that are doing their PhD or their doctorate or their masters. So I teach different things. And I like teaching bioinformatics because I'm not a bioinformatician. So it's like, don't offend any bioinformaticians listening to this. I know how to do a little bit of bioinformatics, but I know how someone that doesn't know what bioinformatics is, I know how they feel, because I was one of them not that long ago. And that's why I like teaching it now, because for me, it's like, this is for humans. It's fine. I've done it, so you can do it. And it's about removing that fear of the computer and like numbers and coding, which sounds all like super NASA or something. And it's like,
Yes.
yeah. And it's like, no, it's for humans. It's fine.
Okay.
So that's my role, I think, on this. And I have students that I've taught the first line of coding, as they told me, and now they need to teach me what they do, because I'm like, you are so much more, and that's amazing when you see people that really take on and really take off with it. So that's been really cool to see as well.
That's lovely. I can see the passion that you have, and also the willingness to give, and I feel like there is no ego in you.
Of course I have my ego.
It doesn't look like it.
I hide it well then. No, of course. And and for example, sometimes I have these conversations with people about negative feedback, which, when you make a mistake or you've written something that, whatever, we get projects that we need to send and they get evaluated and I get the project rejected. And it hurts personally first. I'm like, because, my idea is nice and it's a cool hypothesis, and how dare you don't fund it. So, but you need to move on from that. So it's not, in a way, that is not practical. I know it sounds very sterile, but it's like you need your moment of and then, okay, it's enough, just now move on and continue doing whatever you need to do.
Of course, Rocio, you're human as well.
Yeah.
There are emotions, especially if you have done a lot of work on something and then it gets rejected. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it really takes. The first time they rejected the largest grant I wrote at years ago when I first started, it really took me, it took me some weeks to kind of digest that. Also because some comments, I took them personally. I still consider they were personally. Some comments were like, "Oh, you phrased this in this way," and I was like, "Are you seriously
See the bigger picture.
criticizing that? Come on." So, but now when I get something rejected, which happens, I'm like, and it takes me less to go like, okay, this could have been better. This I disagree. And these, they have a point. So I need to make sure that next time, whatever. So, is that people have always told me about developing a thick skin. I don't think that's the right term, actually. I think you learn to interpret and you learn to be a bit more confident in, yes, this is the stuff I don't know, and this is the stuff I know, and that's okay. That, for me, defines it better, rather than, oh, I get rejected and it doesn't affect me. Please. That doesn't exist. I don't think it'll ever exist for me, definitely.
So what else have you learned as a scientist?
I've learned to be patient.
Mm.
I've learned to be patient, and I've learned. I think I think more of what I say and the words I use. So I used to blab more, even. I think because we need to use this precise language, I think about the words more now, I think, than before. I don't know, that science or age or both, but whatever, it works. And we have to learn about communication, and that's something that has also changed from when I started my PhD. I don't think anyone had to learn how to explain their science to the general public, while for now it's essential. And I have found that really difficult, actually, because you always think of technicalities and these little things and whatever. And it's true for anyone that is not doing that, is what are you talking about? I don't know what you.
Exactly.
So it gives you perspective, which I really like.
Exactly. And especially when you talk, I mean, when I've heard scientific interviews and or documentaries or anything, even like small terms that they would think that everybody knows. Not everybody knows.
No.
So I love when people and especially scientists are able to speak in a way that everybody understands, right? That you're not talking to a scientist, or you can adjust, definitely, I think, the language. But when you talk to the general public, it's nice to have that in mind when speaking.
It is. We all like understanding. We all like understanding things. I think that's a human thing, and that you saw that also in COVID, because when people were communicating on TV, and I was like, I can't believe they just said that, because you could tell how that could be misconstrued or misinterpreted or manipulated in a certain way that people, and in those occasions people always think the worst. And therefore I saw that a lot about communication in science, and it's like, and it's not about lying, it's about people don't know all the facts with all the statistical things that you have in your head, and you need to distill the message so that is true, but in a way that people can understand it and not cause either, oh, it doesn't matter, everything is fine, but also not to cause absolute panic about when we didn't need to panic, because it was clear it was bad as well. So it was, so I think that changed in science as well a lot, the way we communicate, the way we are perceived, maybe, because you saw more scientists and they were like normal people on TV, because the ones that see on the movies, it's like, thank you very much. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was like, there are also normal people. And I remember one of my first supervisors in Madrid. I remember when I went there, and I really wanted to join the group, and I was like, all was exciting and it was great. And I remember he telling me, like, you see, I like rock music, I listen to music, and he was just trying to tell me I'm a normal person, even though I'm a scientist. And that's really stuck with me. And it's like, it's true, we do normal things as well. Because the portrait is always of something like someone super weird and always with the head on the clouds and all that stuff. And it's like, maybe sometimes, but not all the time. Come on.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. So what about now, Rocio? What are you working on?
So in my lab, we are working on several projects. Some of them are directly related to understanding severe asthma, which is a particular extreme form of asthma. Asthma is really common. And in the vast majority of cases, people that have asthma can control it with inhalers and live a relatively normal life. But there is a proportion of patients that have asthma that have something called severe asthma. And those are the ones that don't have the disease controlled. Some of them go many, many times to hospital every single year. And it really impairs their life. And there are now treatments that have revolutionized asthma, which still lags behind in comparison with new treatments, in comparison with other inflammatory diseases by a million miles.
Mm.
And that's because we don't understand how it works. So that's what I want to do. I want to understand better how it works and what those treatments do. So I have several projects where we are investigating how certain drugs work and how they affect the cells that are in the lungs of those patients. So we are doing a lot of that work, and we do it using a lot of molecular biology, which is looking at the little molecules and how genes are expressed and why and when, and which ones are different. And we also are doing now more things in 3D, because we tend to do everything in a way in 2D in science, where we just have like a petri dish, the one that always appears in cartoons and stuff, and you just put something on it. And now there is a big drive in the field, in this one and in many others, to do things in 3D cultures. So you have different layers that represent different types of cells, and you are able to actually physically see how cells behave. So the ones in the airways have these things called cilia, which I always compare to a field of wheat, that does this with the wind. And for example, for smokers, it's like if you put tar on top of it. So all the things are like this, with a blank thing of black tar on.
Wow, so interesting.
So we can see that in the microscope. We can see and we find that amazing. And every time, so there's someone in the lab who's doing her PhD. She's a doctor, but she's doing her PhD, Jess. And she makes movies, and she sends me the movies. My WhatsApp is very colorful. I have pictures of my family, pictures of experiments, pictures of all kind of mixed together, and we get excited about stuff like that in the lab. So yes, in a way, it's very nerdy, but it's cool when you are surrounded by people that get excited about the same nerdy things. So we have a big branch of the lab investigating that.
I mean, how beautiful it is to have people to be so passionate about what they do. And it's like your team.
It's the best. Honestly, the team makes everything.
Yeah.
You can have your wonderful ideas or your wonderful whatever. If you don't have a good team, you may as well keep your ideas at home and write them in a book.
Amazing. Yeah. It's also lovely, I mean, to experience and to have met you, to see how passionate and considerate you are. And it seems like really this is your life purpose, to be in science.
Thank you. For me, it was what I wanted to do. I just didn't. Once I thought I would like to be a scientist, I didn't think of anything else. And here I am. So I'm lucky as well that I had that so clear. So in a way, advice it's unfair.
It's unfair? What's unfair?
When people ask me for advice on, I'm not sure what to do, and I'm like, I wanted to do science always. It's like,
how did that clarity come? It was very clear, or since the beginning?
For a long time. So I don't even remember when that happened, but I think it's when I started doing more physics and chemistry and biology. And then when I started studying biology, I was like, wow. And then I didn't know exactly in what. And that's what took me a little bit longer. But I knew I like understanding mechanism. So I like knowing how things work. And that's what I was driven by, really. And then I found that I really like that, but also part of me needs to see the application to human health, which is not the case for a lot of people. And that's totally fine, because you need pure basic science as well to know just how things work, because then, it's impossible to know everything. So you get ideas from those concepts to apply them to something else. So you need a bit of everything. And I think, I started going to labs since my third year at uni, and biology is 5 years, and then I haven't done anything else.
That's amazing. So can I ask you, what advice would you give to people who are going into science now?
Enjoy it. Learn that something not working is not a failure.
Mm, that's important.
It's I don't think we cope very well with failure in general. And sometimes that worries me a bit because it's part of life. We all fail, and you actually, even if it's painful, you learn a lot more. Because when everything works and everything is great, then you just give for granted that everything works and everything is great. So there is nothing to change or to do differently. And I think that's something that science teaches you. And even students that have come to my lab and then to do like their last year project, I remember one of them told me, I hadn't realized how hard it is. And I was crying because, something happened to the cells or something. So in the end, when you come out of that, you think it's not important. No one has died or anything. But in that moment, this is like you've put so much effort, so much thought. You think you're doing everything fine, and then it doesn't work. And she told me that actually taught her a lot about resilience. So it's overcoming that bit and knowing that once you pass that, there is a massive super green field with Bambis running around. But it's having the ability of looking beyond that rather than folding on yourself and saying, this didn't work, or I'm not good enough, or this is too hard. Everything is hard.
I'm curious now, when you shared that, has it ever happened to you that you've tried many, many times and then it's like, okay, this is enough. It won't work.
Yeah. Many times. And deciding to leave something that's the ego. You think, no, I'm going to try again because this time it's going to work. And it doesn't. And it may not be the time. You may not have enough information. You may not know enough. And that's what it is. On the other hand, I've done things that took me a year to get done, but I knew it was technically possible. It was a technical thing, and that's different. One thing is to have an idea, and maybe your idea is wrong. And another thing is, it was actually a PCR. It was super difficult to do this one. But because it's a PCR, I knew it was possible. It could be done. But I didn't, so I had to read a lot and test many things. And at the end, when I got the result, it was like, ah. And that was really good. That was a really sweet moment. But because I knew it had to work, is that time when you don't know if what you are doing is incorrect, and you are looking for something that doesn't exist, that is hard. And yeah, it's happened.
Mm. Yeah, it seems like there is that fine balance of knowing exactly when to persist and when to let go.
Yeah, because for big leaps, and I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen in my lab, I'm saying in general in science, for big leaps, a lot of it has been absolute being stubborn like a goat, going like, this is going to work, and you need a little bit of that. So it's a very difficult balance, knowing when you are close to the end or when it's actually time to wrap it up and go home, and or do something else. It doesn't mean that everything is terrible. So that's why it's always good to have the super cool idea, a bit trendy, a bit edgy, and the one that is not so, but it's gonna give you some data.
So how have you developed these skills? The skills of the resilience and the clarity and the knowing of when to let go and when to be stubborn as a goat.
Well, I think part of it is communicating with others, because that's why having really good colleagues, they sometimes someone just can tell you, but this doesn't really seem like whatever, and then you so it's having people that you trust and people that will tell you what is good for you, not what you want to hear.
Beautiful.
A bit like a good friend. Like a good friend is gonna tell you what it is, not what you like. And we need that in science as well. And it's about listening as well, and taking a step back, looking at evidence, doing some more reading, and then, getting to the conclusion that sometimes you may not even have the tools, so it, not necessarily the idea is wrong, but you may not have the tools to demonstrate that, and it may not be the time. So instead of saying, no, I'll abandon it, it's like, just put it in the drawer. Maybe you'll come back to it later. But for the moment, you need to do something else.
So interesting. I admire your persistence, your dedication, your commitment, your open heart. It really seems like you have found your playground in science, and you're really happy with it.
Yeah, I am. Thanks. Sometimes it's hard, but I consider myself a very privileged person, because I get to do what is my hobby, and that's luck. So I grab onto that and I hold on to that like a treasure for those times where things may not be going the way you want, or something, whatever happens, and you're like, take a step back and just breathe in and, see things how they are, and then move on. But yeah, we all have our moments, Miguel.
Of course we do. Oh, I so much enjoyed this, Rocio. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your wisdom, and so full of wisdom. I feel like I'm envious of of your team being together. It really seems like a lot of fun together.
Thank you. They make the ecosystem, I have to say. It's an ecosystem.
Beautiful. And you too.
Thank you. I try to balance the ecosystem that's my task. Putting a bit of rain here, putting a bit of sand there. But yeah, I totally believe it's the team. You can have your wonderful or not wonderful ideas, that it's the drive, and also it's that drive and passion also it's contagious. So it has this, it is contagious, really. So when you have people, that around you that get excited when something works, you're like.
And working with leaders is both ways. So give yourself also some credit.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again. Thank you. Thank you for being with us in the Life's Lessons Lounge. Remember, every story has its wisdom. Join us next time for more insights and inspiration. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep sharing your own story.